The sun has left. Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Whether you're sharing business stories or personal stories, the stories you share have the power to reframe and change your perceptions of yourself and how others perceive you. And today's guest is somebody that you are going to find very interesting. I met her on LinkedIn after I saw some of the content that she's putting out there. And listeners, you are in for a treat. Tessa Clarke, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited because I've been watching your content for a couple months now since I first saw it and then started reaching out to you about being a guest on my podcast. And I was so grateful that you said yes and immediately scheduled time. So, I've been looking forward to this. So Tessa, as you know, I love to begin by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people might not know about them. The reason I do that is we have a tendency to anchor people in time based on one interaction or one thing that we see about them on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. And I think that's doing such a disservice to us as connectors, as social beings, because it limits our potential to see the complexity behind every human being. So what do you think? Do you have something in mind?
So you've given me long enough to try and think of something. So the first thing that sprang to my mind, other than shock horror, what can I share, is it's going to seem a bit random, but actually it does sort of plot through my life. And this is my relationship with clothes. So I've always had a very complicated relationship with clothes. I need to be very clear. I am not a fashionista. I'm sort of quite the opposite. But the reason why I've had a complicated relationship with clothes, which has really evolved in interesting ways over time, is because I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere in the northeast of the UK. We had no money, and all of my clothes were sort of secondhand, sent in a very large potato sack through the mail from a sort of friend of a friend by the family. And I really did not like the clothes that this slightly older girl had. And then when I sort of had my first job and I had an opportunity to kind of shop for myself, I found it very interesting and overwhelming, but I sort of leapt in full steam ahead. But I can also remember it created a lot of anxiety for me because I didn't know kind of what my identity was, who am I? And I can remember the greatest source of anxiety was around fancy dress parties, where there'd be like a theme. And that was just my idea of absolute hell until I realized one day, you just got to plan ahead. And I pivoted from being someone who absolutely hated fancy dress parties to someone who then realized that I absolutely love a fancy dress party because they are fun, or a costume party, as your audience might know it, because they're super fun when you know what you're going to wear. So something that most people don't know about me is I have an enormous sort of box full of costume party outfits. But then my relationship with clothing has changed again, because now that I am fully rooted in the world of sustainability and sustainable living, I've had to abandon those sort of footloose, fancy-free shopping, retail therapy kind of days and really revisit my relationship with clothes, because believe it or not, there are enough clothes on the planet to clothe us all for the next 100 years. So I've now really vowed to try and not be part of the fashion problem, not to buy fashion brand new. So I've had to rethink my relationship with clothing once again. So there you go. A long answer to a short question.
Wow. Well, I was counting on that from you. I was counting on that. And that is so interesting. Like, I never would have thought about that in terms of, I've thought about it a lot in terms of what our clothes do in terms of our identity and how we experience ourselves and how we want to present ourselves to people. I think about that a lot, but I never thought about it in terms of your progression over time, through time, in your relationship with clothing. I think many of us can relate to that when we think about it. It's just not something that I had considered before. But I have had that similar difficulty in clothing, not because I was getting hand-me-downs from a cousin or friend. I actually was wearing my brother's old jeans, his Levi's in high school, which in the 80s was really um, not a great fashion statement to wear your
Yeah.
brother's Levi's because everyone else was in Jordache and the high waist stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but I also remember that suddenly experiencing a growth spurt, but it wasn't in height. I went from like an A cup or a double A cup to a double D cup to a triple D cup in less than 2 years.
I had the same experience. I remember sort of going away on a school holiday and then coming back, and all the boys were suddenly like, "What happened to you?"
Interested. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my relationship with clothes changed, boom, overnight. I
Yeah.
could not find
Yes.
anything to fit. I hated going shopping. Bathing
Yeah.
suits were the worst. I hid them for years. I was in my 40s before I started wearing clothes that people even knew I had them.
Well,
So
that's another evolution I've had, because I had the same experience as you, and then post kids and post breastfeeding, they've shrunk again, and so it's a whole bunch of clothing that I could never previously wear for the past of 20 plus years. Suddenly, I can wear again. So
isn't that
yeah, and
funny?
I guess I've learned that we always think the grass is greener the other side, and it never is. There's always pros and cons.
That's for sure. But your relationship with clothes changes. I interviewed a woman named Renee Lindo, and one time, and she does this for a living. She helps people identify their style and helps
Mhm.
them clothe themselves and design the way they want to experience themselves through their clothing and their accessories and jewelry and hair. And she's just amazing. And she once said something about when you're in clothes that don't fit, you walk into your closet and you're looking at clothes that you could maybe fit in, but they're not you anymore, and you need to get rid of them. Life is like that. Parts of your identity that we start to shed, and we
Yeah.
think, I'm never going to wear this again, even if it fits. This no longer fits me.
Yeah.
So, lots of analogies to run with this. But I'm going to come back to this whole sustainability thing because I've been
Yes.
thinking about that a lot lately too, probably not quite to the extent that you're doing it. But my daughter-in-law now works at a secondhand store. And so I'm seeing things from that perspective, the collection side
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
reams and reams and reams of collection coming in through the trailers that she unloads.
Yeah. We are, as a species, we are drowning in stuff, and there's just an inordinate amount of stuff in all of our homes, but also sadly just way too much of that is ended up being wasted. So globally, each year humanity generates 2.5 billion tons worth of waste, and it's just absolutely mind-boggling. We are just sort of have this rapacious desire. We're just taking all of these resources from the earth. We are using them for a tiny fraction of their lives, and then we're sending them off to waste streams, and it's just not sustainable. But unfortunately, our whole economy and our whole society and whole kind of way of living is based with consumption at its foundations and at its core. But we've really got to rethink that, and rethink that really very quickly.
Well, that's exactly what caught my attention when I read about the work that you're doing now in UK. Um, so I like to go about this obviously from a story perspective, and I
Yes.
love for people to be able to tell us what you do without telling us what you do to begin,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
we'll get into later on the bits and pieces of how it happens, so that people
Yeah.
understand from the start the impact
Yeah.
versus the what.
Well, I can definitely do that for you, because Olio really started through a story, and that story was an experience that I had, which took place 10 years ago. Now I was living and working outside of the UK and moving back to the UK, and on moving day, the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. And as I said earlier on when we were chatting, I'm a farmer's daughter. So I grew up working incredibly hard on the family farm. And in my family, food waste was just flat out criminal. So when the removal men told me I had to throw away all of this uneaten food, I was like, no way. There is absolutely no way I'm putting perfectly good food in the bin. So instead, I bundled up my newborn baby, my toddler, And I set out into the streets in the depth of winter, hoping to find someone to give my food to. And unfortunately, I failed miserably. The lady who was normally always in this one spot outside our local supermarket asking for help was not there that day. I shed a few tears of frustration that I'd kind of gone through all this effort. I was super stressful day and I really shouldn't have been doing this. The remove men were not happy at all. Anyway, so I went back to my apartment, and when they weren't looking, I resorted to sneaking my non-perishable food into the bottom of my packing boxes. And that was the moment I thought, oh my goodness, I'm probably sort of resorting to cross-border smuggling here, and that's illegal, and I'm not the criminal sort. Why isn't there an easier solution? Why isn't there an app where I can just advertise my food and give it away to whoever lives nearby and wants it? So that was really the light bulb moment for Olio. And I told quite a few people about this idea of a neighbor to neighbor food sharing app. And most people thought that baby brain had got the better of me. I should get off maternity leave, get back to work. But luckily, my co-founder, Sasha, who her name is Sasha Celestial One. So she's also from, I guess, a kind of unconventional upbringing. Her parents were hippie entrepreneurs in Iowa. She immediately loved this idea of a neighbor to neighbor food sharing app. And together, once we had researched the problem of food waste and could see no one else solving that problem, we resolved to work together on it. And so that is what sort of brought us to where we are today.
I love it. I love that story, solving a problem that you experienced yourself. I think that's generally the most effective. Well, effective is probably one of the wrong words, but the most inspired entrepreneurial beginning is when you have a problem and you're so passionate about solving it.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful because it gives you unique insights. It gives you a very personal motivation, but it's also a really important route into entrepreneurship because I had known that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial for probably about 5 years before taking the leap and doing it. And I now look back and I think, why did it take me so long to pluck up the courage and take that leap? And there are a couple of factors at play. The first one was that I wasted those 4 or 5 years wandering around, sort of looking for an idea, waiting for an idea to descend from the heavens. And that didn't actually happen. So I was sort of an aspiring entrepreneur, but I didn't have an idea. And I've now realized, oh, I shouldn't have been looking for an idea. I should have opened my eyes and looked really intently for a problem that existed in the world that I was really passionate about solving. So I think next time I'd be much quicker at getting to finding a problem. And then the second thing, honestly, was I didn't have much confidence in myself. Just like the word entrepreneur, it conjures up a certain type of person, and I was not that. And it was only really through having the companionship of my co-founder, very good friend, Sasha, saying, yeah, I'm all in too, let's do it together, that gave me the courage and the conviction to make it a reality. So I think they're kind of have been two really important ingredients for us, finding a problem and then finding a great co-founder.
For sure. And listeners, I'd encourage you to really maybe re-listen to what Tessa just said. There are two things that make an entrepreneur successful, or successful is such a strange word. You know, how do you really define success? But
still alive and happy.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. And satisfied with the progress that you're making, even if it's not what you thought it might be. So it can't be tied exclusively to income. It just can't, because then you're constantly striving for something that is not actually a source of happiness or satisfaction. So, listeners, I'm thinking about these two aspects of entrepreneurship, and I wouldn't say you wasted those 4 or 5 years. I would say you were doing what you needed to do to get to the point where you could find something that meant something to you. And any entrepreneurs that just are starting something without having the passion for it are rarely going to find their groove until they find the thing that they're passionate about. And that's when the groove hits. So you were exploring, you were thinking about it, and the confidence is a big part of that. But again, I keep coming back to when I hear people say, I wasted these years, I always cringe because I know that every incident in those 4 or 5 years that led to where you are now had to happen.
Oh, 1,000%. I'm a big believer. Everything happens for a reason.
Exactly. Exactly.
The good and the bad. It was all as was destined
Exactly.
to be. I think that you raised. Oh, sorry. Go on.
The second part is making sure you have a partner or a community that is going to support your big idea. I say this all the time, that if you are excited about something, you start to generate some energy about something that is meaningful to you, and you go to your group of friends or your community and you say, I've got this crazy idea. And if their first answer isn't, oh, that's awesome, how can I help? You're in the wrong community.
Correct.
Find your people. So
yes. And that's really, really, really important, is not to confuse the community that you're in and talking to with whether the problem you're trying to solve is valid or not. Because I learned really, really early on that there were basically kind of 3 types of people when I talked to them about Olio and what we were trying to do. There was one type of person who just their eyes lit up. They were super excited. Their energy level went up to 10. They started brainstorming and co-creating. They were all in. They were hugging me. Yay.
That's so great.
That was sort of one group of people. It was a small group of people. There was then sort of the next group of people who intellectually understood what we were doing and intellectually were supportive, but I could tell that it didn't excite and engage and energize them. And I could tell that they would sort of come round to Olio, but it would take some time. And then there was this third group of people who I could have talked to till the cows came home all day long. There was nothing I could say that would ever convince them that what we were doing was a good idea, was valid, was ever going to work. And I found that really helpful understanding. Oh, there are these 3 types of people, and I must not waste a single iota of energy or a single breath on those group 3 people, because
they're not your audience.
They're not my audience. They will come to Olio eventually when the whole world is using Olio, but I'm just going to leave them there. They're the sort of the laggards, and they will catch up eventually. And I'm just going to stay super, super focused on group 1 and taking them sort of on the journey with me.
Yes. And slightly into group 2, because they're going to ask you the hard questions.
Yes.
I always find that I have to have the cheerleaders that are all in. Oh, yeah. But then I have to have my husband who can be both. He can be my cheerleader, but he can also say, well, have you thought about, this is great. Keep in mind that this might happen, helping me to really think through, because I don't have the accountability internal compass that other people might have. So I have to have accountability partners to help keep me in that place.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And you mentioned sort of your husband, and I think your immediate relationships that you have around you when you're at the point of founding a company. I think there's one thing that's really important to understand. There is never a right time to found a company or build a business, ever. Okay, so you just sort of need to do it. But what I will say is that it does require you to have important conversations with those who are around you and who you need to be sort of all in with you. So for me, so talking of kind of no ideal time, I had a newborn baby and a toddler and no childcare support. It was the breadwinner in our family was having to do consulting work at the same time. My husband was renovating our house. So it was all very suboptimal time to be launching a business, but it was the right idea at the right time. And we all, my husband and I agreed, yes, I'm going to go for it, and see where we get to. But you mentioned sort of finances and money, and that's a really important part of the early day considerations. So the sacrifices that you have to make, unless, if you're lucky enough to be independently wealthy, then yay for you. But for many people, that's not the case. And that was the case for us. And I can remember sort of just having to budget down to every sort of £10 or $10 worth of expenditure for our family P&L essentially, and just strip out anything that was other than the bare bones, and we had to reduce it to its absolute minimum. And that was difficult, especially because I was sort of later on in life. I wasn't in my early 20s. And so I had a friendship circle that wanted to go here and do this and do that and have weekends away. And you just constantly say, yeah, I can't afford that. I can't afford that. I can't afford that. So that's a reality of the sort of personal sacrifices that you have to make. But it was way more than made up for by the fact that, in my experience, doing work with purpose and doing your own thing, both of those are kind of 0 to 1 experiences. They're absolutely game changing in terms of your personal happiness and fulfillment. And so whilst my salary was, and still is kind of a fraction of what I could be earning, my happiness is many, many, many multipliers higher than if I still had my big old corporate salary.
I love that. And not just happiness. I mean, I would say there's so much more than seeking happiness, right? We're
fulfillment, I think I would say.
Fulfillment.
Yeah.
Yes. I think about satisfaction.
Yeah.
Being able to look in the mirror and say, I am satisfied with what I'm putting into the world around me, the community around me, in my children, in the community that I've chosen and committed to. I find that when I do that, I think more in terms of gratitude than happiness.
Yeah. And I think when I was in those sort of 4 or 5 years, when I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, I can remember very vividly being very fortunate to go on leadership courses that my corporate employers would send me on. And I can remember so vividly being sat in the audience, listening to these incredible, inspiring speakers on the stage, talking about all the positive impact they were having on the world. And I can remember just getting sick and tired of being so inspired by other people and then being totally uninspired by myself. So even though I had a CV and a LinkedIn profile that looked great, headhunters loved, I was not proud of what I was doing. I was not inspired by myself. Whereas now I am much more proud. I can be proud of what I'm doing. And I know that my kids can be proud of what I'm doing. And that is, and I often sort of project forward to my deathbed. How am I going to feel on my deathbed? And I know that doing the work that I'm doing now, I will feel way more contented on my deathbed than had I just stayed in my corporate career, just being a cog in a very large machine that was almost certainly destroying the planet. So
yes. Oh, that is so inspiring. I think a lot about the Mae West quote, and I think Mark Twain said something similar too, that I only regret the things I didn't do. That quote is attributed to Mae West, but I think Mark Twain said something similar, that I think a lot about legacy. And every time I go to a memorial service or a funeral or hear people talk about someone who's passed, I think, what will they say about me? And while we don't have control over what other people say about us or what other people think about us, we do have influence. And what you're doing is definitely influencing the legacy that you leave behind. So tell me about an experience in your work that when things came together and what that looked like, because I think our listeners still don't understand what Olio necessarily is.
Yeah. So Olio essentially is an app that connects people with their neighbors so that you can give away rather than throw away your spare food and your household items. So let's imagine that we'll take food examples first. Let's imagine you're going away for the weekend or you're going away on holiday. Perhaps you've had a barbecue and you've overcatered. Perhaps you're going on a diet. You've got unwanted food gifts. Perhaps your garden has been particularly abundant. For whatever reason, you've got surplus food. You can just snap a photo and add it to the app. Then people living nearby get an alert. They can browse the listings, request what they want, and pop around and pick it up. And that really was the original problem that Olio existed to solve, because globally, a third of all the food we produce each year gets thrown away. It's worth over $1 trillion. Alongside that, we've got 800 million people who go to bed hungry every night. In the UK, we have over 10 million people living in food poverty. In the US, you have approximately 50 million people living in food poverty. So we've got widespread food waste, we've got widespread hunger. And then when you look in countries like the UK and the US, where does all of that food waste take place? Certainly in the UK, 60% of all food waste takes place in the home. I think in the US, it's 40 to 50% of all food waste takes place in the home. But families are throwing away thousands of dollars worth of perfectly good food every single year that could have been eaten. And so what Olio does is we reconnect people to our local communities so we can give away that food instead of throw it away. Because our core insight is that no one enjoys throwing away food, because we've actually been hardwired not to. It is literally our life source. So it makes no sense whatsoever to throw away our life source. The reason why we do it is because we're disconnected from our local communities. And so Olio provides a way to reconnect you with your local community, so you have got someone to give your spare food to. And then very quickly, people started using Olio for when they were decluttering their kids' playroom, or their moving house, or that toiletries drawer that many of us have got full of sort of stuff that's just never going to get round to being used. And so people use Olio to give away household items as well. But then we perhaps where we're having our greatest impacts at the moment is actually came from a really early conundrum we had. So we launched Olio as this food sharing app to connect neighbours to give away their spare food. And we very quickly hit on a massive problem, which was that our early adopters, so those group 1 people, they hated food waste, therefore they didn't generate any, therefore they had no food to give away. And we had,
that would be.
You see where this is going?
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I hadn't thought of that at all, but that's totally accurate. The people who would be most excited about it are the ones that are already doing the right thing.
Yeah. And then we had hoped that local cafes and bakeries and delis would use the app at the end of the day to bring extra traffic into their store, then they could cross-sell, upsell, etc. But they were far too busy running their day-to-day business to mess around messaging with neighbours on an app. So they also didn't use the app. So we were a food sharing app with no food, which I'm sure you'll agree is pretty useless. And so we thought, well, how can we solve this existential problem? And then we thought, well, why don't we take the people who have time but no surplus food and match them with the businesses that have lots of surplus food and no time? And that has led to the creation of what is today called our Food Waste Heroes program. And we have over 140,000 trained volunteers who are members of our community, who we recruit through the app. We train them on our food safety management system. And then once you're trained up as a food waste hero, you can then claim a collection slot. And that's an opportunity to go to perhaps your local supermarket on, today we're recording on a Wednesday. So maybe at a Wednesday at 7:30 p.m, you'll go to your local supermarket, you will pick up all of their unsold food, you will then take it home, add it to the app. Within minutes, your neighbour's requesting it. Minutes later, they're popping around to your house to pick it up. And that takes that food from being considered a waste stream in the store to, on average, within about an hour, being fully redistributed into lots of local families, and that food is eaten. And to date, we have had over 115 million meals worth of food redistributed via Olio in this way. And we've also had 15 million household items shared. And that collectively has had a massive environmental impact. It's had an environmental impact equivalent to taking over 900 million car miles off the road. And we've also saved over 35 billion litres of water, because food production is incredibly water intensive. And that's the environmental impact. But then whilst Sasha and I founded Olio to solve an environmental problem, what we really quickly learned is that actually the social impact we're having is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the environmental impact. So 2/3 of our community say that they've made friends through Olio. 3/4 say that sharing has improved their mental health, and 84% say that sharing has improved their financial well-being. We've sort of got a cost of living crisis raging here, so it really is making a really significant difference to people. And as is so often the case, what's good for the planet is good for people, and vice versa.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So what is the business structure?
Business model. Yeah,
Yes.
make
Is there
money.
advertisement? But you have to
Yeah,
pay for
we do. The
your
servers, our
salary.
staff.
But
Yeah,
even if it was a not for profit, you still need to pay
yeah.
yourself and
Mhm.
pay for the technology.
Yeah. So we are a for-profit company. We're not yet profitable, but we are for-profit. We're a B Corp, which means that we firmly believe in this sort of new model of business, which is all about profit with purpose. And we generate our revenues primarily, about 90% of our revenues come from businesses paying us for the service we provide. So at the moment, businesses have to pay waste contractors to take that food off to waste streams. And instead, they pay us and we make sure that that food is eaten, and then we give them back all of their impact data as well. So that's our main business model. And then about 10% of our revenues comes from a combination of in-app advertising, which we've had to very reluctantly put into the app, and also a subscription-based model. So if you want to, you can upgrade to unlock an ad-free version of the app and a bunch of other features for a monthly subscription fee.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I'm curious if you've considered having when you. I'm assuming. I'm just going to assume
Mm-hmm.
here that when you're looking for advertisers, you're looking at companies that are also dealing with similar problems.
Values aligned, yes. So that's we sort of don't love advertising as a business model, but when needs must, we've got to be able to cover our costs. Otherwise, we can't continue to have the impact that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So we use a third-party advertising platform, but you can customize it. So we exclude fast fashion. We exclude anything that's promoting the sale of brand new electronics. So we sort of filter out as many categories as we can that don't fit with our values. So
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of
I was
how we
thinking
approach
about
that.
I know there are a couple of companies that you can send your clothes that you're done with in a big
Yes.
sack and they repurpose them, whether they take them apart or use them to create other clothes or whatever they do. So I would think that companies like that would be a perfect fit.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just done a partnership with a company called Seep, who makes sustainable cleaning products in the home. And
Yes.
so that's an absolutely fantastic partnership. We're just
Other B Corp.
completely aligned. Yes, exactly. Other B Corps.
Oh, that's so great. I have a couple people I'd like to introduce you to. I
Please
think
do.
that would be cool. Wow, Tessa, this is such an amazing story. I've been thinking about this since I first saw this. And there, how distributed is this? Are you
Yeah.
seeing these neighborhoods pick up in the US?
Yeah.
Or is it?
So we've had 8 million people join Olio so far, about half of whom are in the UK, half of whom are outside of the UK. And we have had items successfully shared, so not just added to the app, but added to the app and requested and picked up in over 60 countries so far. And that international expansion has taken place really very organically. So we have something that we call our ambassador program, and we have over 60,000 ambassadors. So these are people who are passionate about our mission and they want to be able to use Olio in their local community. So we put them onto a digital pathway where we give them content and information and things that they can use to spread the word about Olio in their sort of online networks and channels. And then you can also download, or if you're in UK or Ireland, we will mail to you physical posters, letters, flyers, etc., for you to distribute in your local community. And so, yeah, we've got small sort of pockets of people using Olio all over the world. Our largest communities outside of the UK and Ireland are in Singapore. So we've got about 200,000 people using Olio in Singapore. And again, that just started through a small group of people who were using a Facebook group and realized that Olio was much better suited for the kind of sharing of things. And so they migrated their community over, and then it's just grown and grown. Got a couple of 100,000 people on Olio in Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Argentina, countries like that, and in little pockets and small communities across the US. When I wouldn't yet say we're sort of up and running in the US, but yeah, if anyone wants to get Olio going in their local community, then they can crack on and do that right away.
Let's come full circle to the first part of your story when you had this food. When was a time recently, like in the last, I don't know, month or two, where you saw the impact, you experienced it in a way that caught you? Maybe you didn't think about it at the time, but now you can look back and go, "Oh, right, this is why I'm doing this. This is why this matters."
Well, it's funny you should say that, because while Sasha and I are incredibly proud of the impact we've had, it is mind blowing. We feel like Olio is our greatest success, but it's also our greatest failure, because the reality is we've achieved a rounding error of what we should have achieved. Sort of the climate crisis is very real, and the number of people who are struggling in food poverty is very, very real, and we are still massively subscale. So we spend most of our time sort of beating ourselves up, like, why haven't we achieved more? Why haven't we grown more? But this summer is our 10-year anniversary. And so we have pulled together a sort of booklet, I guess, really kind of celebrating that 10-year journey and celebrating the impact. And in that, we share not only our impact data, but much more importantly, our impact stories. And so we've got a section in the app called the Forum, and that's where people can post recipes and zero waste tips and tricks. And there's a section called Olio Love. And if you go in there, that's where people will just share all these beautiful, beautiful real stories of how Olio has, honestly, like, people talk to us frequently about how Olio has changed their life. People use the phrase that it's like a beacon for humanity. It's restored their faith in humanity. And just lovely stories of someone said that someone had come around to their house to pick up something. I'm not quite sure what it was. But the person who'd come around had then seen that their lawn was kind of overgrown, and they just offered to just cut their lawn for them and help them out in their garden. And it's just beautiful stories like that. And then we've had people say that they've had mental health challenges. They haven't left their house for a year, but Olio has motivated them to get up and get out, and now they're sort of reintegrating, and their mental health is so much better. And that's when you realize, it's when you hear, so the stats are fantastic, but it's the human stories that really give Sasha and I the motivation to sort of keep going against the odds, because it is honestly exhausting being a founder, trying to drive behavior change in a world that is set up not to change. And so you've got to find ways to re-energize yourself and to keep going, to keep fighting every single day. And looking at those real stories really helps us do that.
Is there something specific that you can look back at? Like, I love to pick out, because I look for the evidence of my success, not as an overall, this is, the number of people that I've helped or guided, or, this is the number of people that got new jobs because of my interview course or whatever, but more specific. So for instance, I just told this story on a recent podcast, was when I got a text message from one of my clients who said that she had just had an 8-minute conversation with her 15-year-old son, full sentences, with his mother. And it was smiley faces and heart emojis after this text message. And I explained to people that I was working with this woman's team, and we were having a StrengthsFinder conversation about her talents and those of a colleague that she was struggling with. And I mentioned where sometimes her talents might get in her way a little bit, or sometimes she could come across as judgy. And she realized that the things that she was struggling with in communication with her colleague might be able to be applied to some of what she was going through with her son. And getting that text message, that's what I needed. And so when I tell that story, my clients, or my potential clients, learn a lot more about me than if I tell general stories about my impact. So do you have one of those that you would share?
I mean, so the honest answer is no. And I think that's probably more just a reflection of how I show up in the world, which is I'm just constantly looking forwards. I feel quite uncomfortable celebrating success, and that's probably an issue of my own.
Mhm.
And I'm just
people have that.
constantly, I'm constantly kind of beating myself up, like, why haven't we achieved this? Why haven't we got that? Why haven't we done this? Why haven't we done that? And, we're living through just a crazy heat wave now in the UK, which is, it's scary because this is just like the warm-up act, so that's what really motivates and so I don't spend any time really thinking about those particular moments. Something else, in addition to like the impact numbers and in addition to the impact stories, that does happen that I do really enjoy is on many occasions, I've had someone come up to me and say, I heard you speak at this event, or something or other related to us, and that inspired me to set up my business that is having this positive impact on the world. That just to say, wow, that's how change happens. That's how systems change happens. Is you sort of galvanize and empower and inspire and motivate other people to kind of do their work. So that I do get sort of the warm fuzzy glow when someone tells me that.
Good. I love to hear that.
And in fact, actually, the founder of SEEP, the sustainable cleaning company that I was telling you about, when we'd done the partnership, and then I randomly bumped into her at an event, and she said, "Oh, it was your mission at Olio that inspired our mission here at SEEP." I was like, "Wow, that is, that's awesome. That's really cool."
Systemic change.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I love that. I also think about the impact on our employees, the people that work for us. I know that the people that work for me, I have one part-time employee, but I have a variety of consultants and contractors that work with me. And I love that my relationship with them has also made our lives better. So I think about my assistant, who her confidence has just risen so dramatically since we started our work together. Yeah. And so it's not just the impact on my clients, the people that pay me, but the people I pay also are being impacted by it.
That is really true. So Sasha and I have invested a lot of time and emotional energy and love into kind of building the type of organization that we think should be the type that exists in the 21st century. And our team absolutely love working for Olio. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Sort of, we recruit everybody to be not just mission aligned, but mission obsessed. So you've got a whole group of people who are mission obsessed behind the same mission. We recruit against our company values, which are inclusive, resourceful, caring, and ambitious. So everybody is kind of shows up with those values. And then we have never had an office. So, way before COVID, we were remote working and working very flexibly. We're a team of about 60 people now. And it is amazing knowing that when we do our employee satisfaction surveys, well over half the team say this is like the best job I've ever had. So that's phenomenal. And I remember once we run an annual company retreat where we do bring people together face to face. And actually last year, someone in the team just wrote me and gave me just this beautiful letter, just talking about kind of her background and her upbringing and how she could just never have dreamt that she could be doing the work that she was doing now with us. And again, you don't realize often the impact that you are having until people tell you that. And it's really lovely when people do take the time out to tell you.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay, there we go.
Because the impact is so far beyond what you're doing with your business. And I think it's important for our listeners to hear all of the aspects of that impact and not just those statistics are incredible. There's no downplaying or dismissing that. The statistics, the change, the experiences of your participants, add to that these 60 or so lives where they
and their families, right? Sort of it's not just that individual, it's sort of the network they
it's their entire community that they are influencing because they're satisfied at work, where we
Yeah.
spend so many hours of our lives. And the more people that are satisfied and um, inspired by the work they're doing,
Mm.
the better in terms of our community.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have a saying, so the team laugh at me because I say it the whole time. I'm like, life is too short to be miserable. And
Yes.
so I really like, we work really, really hard on our employee satisfaction survey. You know, if anyone has a personal satisfaction score of kind of less than 7, that just sets off massive alarm bells. I'm like, life is too short to be miserable. You must talk to me or Sasha or your line manager or people in culture that we've got to fix this. Because yeah, honestly, we'll all be dead in a minute. So
you either find something that's going to satisfy you and bring you that level, or you find it wherever you sit. I mean, so that impact is equally important to the business impact on the globe and on the communities outside of that. I think about that in terms of my work with the StrengthsFinder coaching that I do to improve communication at work. Because I know, like this woman that I told you about that sent me that text message, it's not just at work where she's going to be a better leader. She's going to grow and develop this employee that she is having friction with because now she understands his language. She knows what inspires him. And without the conversation, she would likely have missed it and either lose the employee or have worse, a disengaged employee, which is worse than losing them. As far as Gallup is concerned, and as far as I'm concerned. But it's that beyond the work that I think about. This woman and her son now have a relationship or potential in their relationship that they might have missed out on, at least for a few years until the kid grew up a little bit. But even so, that and it's not just between her kid and his peers. You know, he has a different perspective now that he could share with his friends should something come up with them. And
it's the ripple effect, isn't it? The ripples just go out.
Absolutely. And it's more intense than the clients that you're working with because it's so direct and your leadership is guiding them to be better leaders. Once they see what it can look like, most people manage the way they were managed, even if they hated it, because they don't know different or they don't think about how it could be different. But
that's what's fun. Yeah, that's what's
modeling it, right?
Building your own business, and also we're a proudly sort of female co-founded business. And so I'll honestly say that Sasha and I, we both had just under about 15, 20 years of corporate career before founding Olio each. And we kept roughly 50% of what we learned for that corporate environment, but we happily tossed away the 50%. And we're like, this just makes no sense at all. And it is just wonderfully liberating being able to build a business in the right way and just use kind of common sense rather than just defaulting to this is the way things are done in the business world. It's like, no, there's no reason for things to be done that way in the business world, or there might have been a reason 30 years ago, but the world has changed since then.
Right. I just recently, like in the last year or so, realized how it benefited me to have my assistant do all my podcast show notes and take care of things. Her name is Chinook, and she's fabulous. And I recently, when I hired her, I said, I want to just pay you a flat rate. I don't want to pay you for your time. I want to pay you for your expertise and the trust I'm putting into you. When I can rely on you, that is worth money, more so than how many hours you put in. And I recently said, I don't need your hours anymore. I know roughly how much time it takes you. If you do it faster, great. If you do it slower, that's fine. I'm going to pay you a monthly rate based on this average number of hours. And I don't care how much time you put in. I'm paying you for your expertise.
Yeah, we're exactly the same. I could not care less about FaceTime. I just care about you doing your best possible work and the output. And it's up to you to structure your day, your life in whatever way works for you. And because I recognize that some people are early morning people, some people are late night owls, some people sit in between. And the other thing that Sasha and I both really actively role model at Olio is carving out time during the working day for well-being. So we will go for a walk or a run or an exercise class or go swimming or meditate or whatever it might be in the middle of the working day. And we think that's really, really important for people just to perform at their best and to be healthy and happy. So yeah, there are lots of things like that that perhaps wouldn't happen in a conventional business, but when it's your own company, you can do what seems to be the right thing to you.
That's so inspiring, Tessa. This whole conversation has left me glowing. What an inspiring conversation. And I'm so grateful for your time. So last question, when you think about those pivotal moments that led you to where you are, is there one that you can think of, whether it was a conversation with your co-founder or a conversation with an employee or somebody in your family? What was another pivot point that you could share that our listeners can be inspired by?
I think the word sort of pivot is often overused. Well, because we're constantly sort of taking decisions, adapting and changing. But
right. But I think of it more as a dimmer switch than an on-off light switch.
Yeah.
I think a lot of different things happen to get us to where we are. There is no one light bulb moment. However, there are a lot of different pivotal moments that we can kind of.
I'll give you an example from earlier on in my career. So I started off life as a strategy consultant and was very, I guess, sort of young, bright, ambitious, having to interact with people at the top of their game in the corporate world. So felt very, very chronically insecure and showed up everywhere, always like this sort of type A overachiever person. And I can remember when I stepped out consulting into industry, working in the media industry, someone who reported into me said I can't remember exactly what she said, but she basically said, Tessa, sort of when you show sort of your real self, you're so much more likable. And that just makes people want to work with you and do a great job and this, that, and the other. And that was a real aha moment, because I thought that doing well in a professional environment required you to excel at being professional. And that was the first time I thought, to do well in a professional environment, actually, I also need to excel at being personal and being human. And that took me on a journey of getting comfortable with being much more vulnerable. And honestly, just human in the workplace.
That is a perfect turnaround right there. I think we often underestimate what those moments mean to us until we look back and consciously see that moment for exactly the gift that it was.
Yeah.
Wow. That's perfect. Tessa, this has been such a lovely conversation. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think we're all good. Hi, Sanu.
We covered a lot of ground. Listeners, you can find all the links that Tessa provided to me in the show notes associated with this episode at elkinsconsulting.com. Listeners, now it's your turn. When you think about those 4 to 5 years that Tessa talked about in that journey of wanting to be entrepreneurial and thinking about it in terms of what is a problem that I can solve, what is something you can start today? Maybe it eventually becomes a side hustle. Maybe the side hustle stays a side hustle, or maybe it turns into something more. What is a problem that you've experienced that maybe you're the person to solve? Think about that for a little bit and let me know what your thoughts are, what comes up for you, and how I can support you in it. Tessa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
That's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying?